History in Middle-earth is shaped by fragile choices, moments where a single decision changed the fate of nations. Today we ask the question, what if Erebor was never lost? In other words, what if the dwarves had won their fight against the dragon Smaug? The key to this divergence lies in a small, almost forgotten detail from The Hobbit. When Bilbo, Thorin, and the dwarves finally exited the lonely mountain, Barlin suggested they go to Ravenhill, the site of an old dwarven lookout post. Barlin's words reveal the critical turning point. Here in the old days we used to always keep watchmen, and that door behind leads into a rock-hewn chamber that was made here as a guard-room. There were several places like this around the mountain, but there seemed little need for watching in the days of our prosperity, and the guards were made over-comfortable, perhaps. Otherwise we might have had longer warning of the coming of the dragon, and things might have been different. Herein lies the single decision that might change the fate of all of Middle-earth. In this branch of the timeline, the dwarves stationed at Ravenhill are vigilant and take their duty seriously, despite the centuries of comfort and prosperity. Their diligenceness is rewarded when they spot Smaug while he is still a long way off, a distant black shadow in the sky. Quickly they sound the alarm. The dwarves of Erebor rush to their weapons and defensive positions, while the men of Dale, also alerted to the dragon's coming, do likewise. The advance warning is the critical factor. Girion, Lord of Dale, was renowned as a powerful warrior and, like his descendant, an excellent bowman. With more time to prepare, Girion was able to secure a prime position with his great bow and the fabled black arrow that King Thor had given him. Furthermore, this Smaug is young, and has not yet encrusted his belly with a protective armor of precious gems from his hoard. His scales are tough, certainly, but they are no match for the unique properties of the black arrow, forged with ancient skill and the legendary marksmanship of Girion. As Smaug flies over Dale on his destructive course towards Erebor, Girion takes careful aim and releases the black arrow. Unlike his descendant Bard, Girion does not achieve the killing blow. He does, however, manage to inflict a grievous wound, striking with enough force and precision to bring Smaug down in the valley outside the mountain gates. The dwarves of Erebor, already arrayed for battle, pour out of the front gate, their fabled armor gleaming, their swords and axes glistening in the sunlight. They descend upon the wounded dragon, and at their head is Thorin. Smaug, already hampered by Girion's attack, is unable to properly defend himself against the disciplined onslaught of the dwarven host, and is slain. Thorin himself deals the fatal decisive stroke. Thus the kingdom of Erebor and Dale are spared the ruin of the original timeline. The dwarves return to their halls, and the men return to Dale, their alliance and friendship now stronger than ever, forged in the blood of their common enemy. With the immediate threat of Smaug neutralized, the story now presents two distinct paths, both revolving around one singular, immensely powerful artifact, the Ring of Durin, also known as one of the Seven Rings of the Dwarves. At this point in Middle-earth's history, the Ring of Durin is the only one of the seven still in dwarven hands. Four had been consumed by dragonfire, and Sauron had reclaimed the other two. The Seven Rings were intended by Sauron to corrupt the dwarven lords into his loyal servants, much like the Nine Rings did to the men. However, the inherent nature of the dwarves, created by Aule of the Valar, gave them a unique resistance to outright mental corruption. Sauron could not turn them into wraiths. Instead, the rings amplified the dwarves' pre-existing love of gold and riches, driving them to create the great hordes that ironically attracted the dragons, leading to the ruin of the great dwarven kingdoms. In the end, the rings achieved their destructive purpose, albeit indirectly. Our two branches revolve entirely around how Thor and subsequently Thrain and Thorin handle Durin's ring. We will first look at Branch 1, the path of wisdom and might. The first branch, considered the less likely of the two, is where Thor, Thrain, and Thorin resist the corrupting power of the ring, maintaining control over their greed and using its power for the betterment of their people. This is improbable, given the ring's nature, but not impossible. The elves were able to resist the influence of the three, and since Sauron does not currently possess the One Ring, his direct influence on the other rings is diminished. With the death of Smaug, the kingdoms of Erebor and Dale flourish. Dwarves of Durin's folk flock from all over Middle-earth to join Thor's people, and men likewise swell the population of Dale and Laketown. Thror, using the ring's power and critically controlling its influence, increases the wealth and prosperity of his people until Erebor becomes one of, if not the wealthiest and most powerful kingdom in the West. Because Erebor was never lost, the dwarves retain and continue to expand their vast knowledge of crafting and metallurgy, knowledge that was tragically lost in the original timeline. Furthermore, in this timeline, King Thror is a wiser and more disciplined king. He does not isolate his people, but maintains strong friendships with the men of Dale and Laketown. He also establishes a critical trade agreement with Thranduil of the Wood Elf realm, which helps the Elven kingdom grow and expand its own influence. Now the north of Middle-earth is secured by the power of the three strong kingdoms of dwarves, men, and elves. Their combined wealth and power begin to rival that of Gondor itself. A significant consequence of this prosperous timeline is that Thror never goes to Moria and is never killed. Because of this, the seven armies of the dwarves are never assembled, and the brutal dwarf-orc war never occurs. While the three northern kingdoms grow strong, the might of the orcs goes unchecked. They grow so powerful that they completely overrun the whole of the Misty Mountains. On several occasions, orcs from the Grey Mountains attempt to invade Erebor from the north, but these attempts are always met with crushing disaster by the prepared dwarven defenses. A century after Smaug's defeat, Thrain is now king under the mountain. The dwarves of Erebor and the Iron Hills have expanded their territory, driving orcs out of the lands north of the Lonely Mountain and parts of the Grey Mountains. Dale and Laketown have also become massive and influential, and Thranduil's people have largely cleansed the northern parts of Mirkwood. In this time of unparalleled strength, Thorin turns his attention towards Moria. They have never forgotten their ancient home of Khazad-dûm. Thorin goes to his father and tells him that he feels that the time is right for the dwarves to retake Moria. Thrain agrees to his son's quest and grants him leave to gather an army of volunteers. Thorin successfully assembles a massive host, including many of his future companions, his cousin Dane Ironfoot, with forces from the Iron Hills, and even men of Dale and a few elves. For a year the dwarves work tirelessly in their forges, creating the finest weapons and armor. When ready, Thorin leads his army south. They are ferried across Long Lake by men of Laketown and pick up additional elven volunteers in Thranduil's realm. One of the elves to join is none other than Legolas, the king's son. Over the years, Legolas was sent frequently to Erebor for trade talks, and had struck up a genuine friendship with Thorin. He now joins his friend's army in the quest to reclaim Moria. The army travels along the well-maintained roads of the Wood Elf realm, and eventually reach the Dimrill Dale outside the east gates of Moria. While Thorin has been preparing, Gandalf has been preoccupied with the threat of Moria. With Smaug dead for a century, the wizard's fear has turned to Durin's bane. His studies lead him to a terrifying conclusion, that the bane must be a Bolrog of Morgoth. As Thorin's army camps, the White Council is meeting in Lothlorien. Legolas suggests sending a delegation to seek the advice of the Lady Galadriel. The increased communication between the Wood Elves and their kin of Lothlorien facilitate this. Thorin, having learned to trust Legolas, agrees, and he, Dain, and Legolas set out. Arriving at the borders of Lothlorien, Legolas is the only one permitted to enter, and arrives while the council is still in session. Thorin and Dain wait outside the borders of Lorien for Legolas's return. Legolas presents Thorin's plan to the council. Celeborn, Galadriel's husband, is openly distrustful of dwarves and initially orders Legolas to be thrown out. Galadriel, however, calms her husband, echoing her wisdom from the books. If our folk had been exiled long and far from Lothlorien, who of the Galadriel, even Celeborn the Wise, would pass nigh and would not wish to look upon their ancient home, though it had become an abode of dragons? She also reminds him that the dwarves of Moria once saved his life when Sauron attacked Eregion. Armed with the knowledge that Thorin stands at the gates of Moria with a heavily armed host of dwarves, men, and elves, Gandalf seizes the opportunity. He successfully convinces the council that they will never have a better chance to rid Middle-earth of the last of the Balrogs of Morgoth. Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, and Saruman accompany Legolas back to the waiting dwarves. Together they finalize their plans to assault Moria. On the morning of the attack, Thorin's massive army marches up the dale to the very gates of Moria. There they are met by a host of orcs who had come out to meet them, led by Azog, the Defiler. The orcs of Azog are completely outmatched. The dwarves, men, and elves are clad in the finest mail and armored with the sharpest weapons from Erebor's unparalleled forges. The front ranks form an immovable wall that the orcs cannot break. Wave after wave of orcs are cut down by axes and swords, while volleys of arrows thin their numbers. Thorin, standing at the head, fells more foes than any with his axe. Azog, recognizing the leader, rushes forward to engage Thorin in single combat, nearly winning when he shatters Thorin's shield. But Thorin, in a fierce display of determination, fights back with his axe and a thick branch of an oak tree he finds nearby. He wounds and drives Azog back, earning his name of Thorin Oakenshield. As the orc leader attempts to flee back into Moria, he is met by Dain Ironfoot, who finishes him off with his red axe. With their leader dead, the orc lines break into chaos. Dain, standing at the gates, catches sight of a terrifying form, the Balrog, Durin's bane, confirming Gandalf's darkest fears. Gandalf assures Thorin that he and the White Council will deal with the Balrog. Together, the members of the White Council enter Moria, accompanied by Thorin, Dain, Legolas, and a small group of elite dwarves. The Balrog, carrying its sword and whip of fire, attacks soon after they enter. While Gandalf proved capable of defeating the Balrog alone in the original timeline, here he is fully rested and aided by the two other elven ring-bearers, Galadriel and Elrond. Saruman the traitor is likely less effective but still a powerful asset. Using the combined power of their rings and their formidable Maiar and Eldar might, they are able to defeat and utterly destroy the Balrog, ending the threat of Morgoth's fiery demons in Middle-earth forever. With Durin's bane destroyed, Thorin leads his army into the depths of Moria. Though the orcs fight fiercely, the dwarves' determination, spurred by the death of the Balrog and the sight of their ancient home, is unbreakable. For 7 long years, Thorin and his allies not only retake all of Moria, but move deeper into the mountains, systematically destroying every orc stronghold. Dane leads a force that finds and conquers Goblin Town, slaying the Great Goblin and claiming the city as a dwarf holding. Thorin, with the counsel from Gandalf, learns the secrets of the doors of Durin, and the west gates once again stand open, allowing safe passage and trade through the mountain. King Thrain, content to rule from the Lonely Mountain, names Thorin Lord of Moria, and bestows upon him the Ring of Durin, hoping it will aid him in his new kingdom. Legolas, deeply moved by the natural beauty of the land, decides to refound the ancient elven realm of Eregion. Elves from Mirkwood, Lothlorien, Rivendell, and even the Grey Havens flock to him, and together they begin the great work of rebuilding. Now let's take a look at how things stand in Middle-earth. In the north we have three powerful allied kingdoms of Erebor, Dale, and the Wood Elf realm. Trade flows freely and they act as an impenetrable barrier against the Easterlings. The Misty Mountains. Khazad-dûm has been reclaimed, the orcs have been driven to the far northern reaches of the mountains, and passing through the High Pass and Moria is now safe and easy. In the west, Eregion is restored and maintains a close friendship with Khazad-dûm. In the south, Gondor and Rohan remain largely unchanged, but benefit greatly from increased trade with the north and east. A far stronger Middle-earth now stands ready for the latter end of the Third Age. With Smaug and the Balrog dead, Gandalf's focus shifts to the Necromancer in Dol Guldur. Like the original timeline, Saruman the White is resistant to acting against the Necromancer. It is not until the year 2941 of the Third Age that Gandalf decides to act. Since the dwarves never went into exile, Gandalf did not journey to Dol Guldur in 2850 of the Third Age in search of Thrain. By 2941, Gandalf suspects the Necromancer's true identity is Sauron, but he needs confirmation that Saruman cannot dismiss. Knowing he needs a companion who is stealthy and unknown to most of Middle-earth, Gandalf travels to the Shire. Bilbo Baggins is 50 years old and content, but when Gandalf offers an adventure, the Took side of Bilbo accepts, and he once again commences on a grand adventure. Their journey to Rivendell is quicker and less perilous than in the original timeline. They still encounter the trolls, whom Gandalf outsmarts, and they find the troll cave. Bilbo claims the dagger's sting, and Gandalf takes the elven blades Glamdring and Orcris. In Rivendell, Elrond identifies the swords, giving Glamdring to Gandalf and keeping Orcris for the time being. Bilbo meets the young Aragorn and the two strike up a friendship. Instead of crossing the mountain pass, Gandalf and Bilbo travel through the newly established dwarven outpost that used to be Goblin Town. While they are within the tunnels, orcs attack the city. In the resulting chaos, Bilbo and Gandalf are separated, and Bilbo is swept down a tunnel and knocked unconscious. When Bilbo awakens, he is alone in the dark. Unbeknownst to him, he has stumbled down a tunnel that leads to Gollum's Lake. The dwarves had previously sealed this area, but they had recently reopened it before the orc attack. As Bilbo walks, he trips and instinctively puts his hand out, and as he lands, he feels something cool and smooth. The One Ring. He pockets it and continues on. The encounter with Gollum, the game of riddles, and the subsequent escape using the ring plays out exactly as it does in The Hobbit. Bilbo eventually meets Gandalf at the back gate, recounting the tale of Gollum, but once again omitting the discovery of the ring. Gandalf and Bilbo press on to Dol Guldur. At this point, Sauron believes that his ring is lost in the depths of the sea and is not actively looking for it. Critically, Bilbo does not understand what he possesses, and the ring lies dormant. Because of this, Sauron does not notice its presence, but Gandalf notices him and confirms the necromancer's identity. They quickly flee to Lothlorien. While Gandalf summons the White Council, Bilbo travels to Khazad-dûm and meets Thorin, the Lord of Moria. Thorin, never having met a hobbit before, is fascinated by Bilbo, and the two become fast friends. With Sauron's identity confirmed, Gandalf finally convinces the White Council to act. Like in the original timeline, they drive Sauron out, but this time Galadriel, using the power of her ring Nenya, completely unmakes and destroys the vast foundations of Dol Guldur. With the fortress gone, the evil influences in Mirkwood is permanently expunged, allowing the Wood Elves to reclaim the forest and begin to return it to Greenwood the Great. With his goal accomplished, Gandalf is ready to take Bilbo home. However, Thorin invites Bilbo to accompany him to the Lonely Mountain. Thorin has received word that his father Thrain is failing and wishes to see him before he passes. Thorin invites Bilbo to witness the splendor of Erebor and Dale. Bilbo agrees and sets out with Thorin, Gandalf, and Legolas, who is also returning to his home to see his father. Their journey is uneventful. Upon arrival at Erebor, Thorin is informed that his father is failing fast. Thrain dies a few days later. Thorin then becomes King of Durin's folk and names Dane Ironfoot as King under the Mountain, while he continues to rule the greater domain of Khazad-dûm. After a long stay, Bilbo and Gandalf return to Khazad-dûm with Thorin. At the doors of Durin, Thorin presents Bilbo with many gifts, including a specially made mithril shirt. Bilbo and Gandalf stop briefly in Eregion with Legolas before the hobbit finally returns to the Shire, keeping the ring a secret from all but Gandalf, who he had confessed to soon after fleeing Dol Guldur. For the next 60 years, life in the Shire proceeds as in the original timeline. Outside the Shire, however, the world is radically different. Sauron returns to Moria and declares himself openly, but his holdings are significantly reduced. Dol Guldur is destroyed. The elves have fully taken control of Mirkwood. The orcs of the Misty Mountains have been almost completely wiped out by the dwarves. Instead of just Gondor and Rohan standing against Mordor, the powerful kingdoms of Khazad-dûm, Erebor, Dale, Lake Town, and the Wood Elf realm stand ready in the north. The events leading up to the Council of Elrond play out as before: Bilbo's party, Frodo's inheritance, Gandalf's discovery of the truth, and Frodo's flight to Rivendell. At the council, Elrond invites as many allies as possible. The attendees are notably different. Gandalf, Frodo, Boromir, and Aragorn are present. Legolas is there representing his own independent realm of Eregion. Thorin Oakenshield, King of Durin's folk and Lord of Khazad-dûm, attends, bringing his nephew Fili and Kili. Gloin and Gimli are present, having been sent by King Dain to inform Thorin of Sauron's messenger and to warn Bilbo that the enemy is looking for him. The council decides to destroy the ring, the Fellowship is formed, and sets out on the same day as in the original timeline. Unlike in the original timeline, the Fellowship immediately heads to Khazad-dûm, it being the safest way to cross the mountain. Thorin leads them through Khazad-dûm. Since the Balrog has been dead for over a century, the company passes through Khazad-dûm unhindered, continuing on to Lothlorien. The confrontation between the Balrog and Gandalf never happens. Gandalf never dies and does not return as Gandalf the White. The company continues down the river and reaches Ammenhen. Even with Gandalf present, the events play out similarly. Frodo and Sam leave, Boromir is killed trying to defend Merry and Pippin, and the two hobbits are taken by orcs. Gandalf, trusting Frodo, chooses to set out with the three hunters to rescue Merry and Pippin. The four hunters travel the same course and arrive at Fangorn Forest. Gandalf enters alone and speaks with Treebeard, ensuring Merry and Pippin are safe. Hearing of trouble in Rohan, he rides for Edoras. Arriving in Edoras, Gandalf attempts to drive Saruman's influence out of King Theoden. Lacking the increased power he had as Gandalf the White, he begins to lose the struggle. In a pivotal moment, Eru Ilúvatar steps in. Since Eru was the one who brought Gandalf back as Gandalf the White in the original timeline, he interferes here, granting Gandalf the necessary increase in power and reshaping him into Gandalf the White at this critical junction. Gandalf successfully forces Saruman out of Theoden. Here the timelines align closely. Theoden leads his people to Helm's Deep, and Gandalf rides for help. The battle proceeds as before until the wall is breached. As the orcs pour through, a new sound rings out, the blare of a dwarven horn. The defenders look out and see a large army fast approaching through the rain and night. An army of dwarves and elves led by Thorin Oakenshield, King of Khazad-dûm. Upon the Fellowship leaving Khazad-dûm, Thorin had begun preparing his people for war. When word of trouble in Rohan reached him, he marched out of the east gate with his army to aid the west. Thorin's army crashes into the orc lines from behind, completely astonishing and unnerving Saruman's forces. The orc army turns to face this new threat, only to be met by a devastating hailstorm of arrows from the wall, striking their unshielded backs. With the orcs in a panic, Theoden leads a charge from the gates, smashing the enemy host between Rohan's hammer and the dwarven anvil. Saruman's army is defeated. Isengard is taken by the Ents, and Saruman is expelled from the Order of the Astari. As Gandalf and Pippin ride for Gondor, Theoden gathers the riders of Rohan, and Thorin begins his march with his army towards Gondor. Because Thorin marched earlier, he arrives at Minas Tirith simultaneously with Theoden. When the two armies arrive, they find the city besieged, but not as badly as in the original timeline. Due to the strength of the North, Sauron had to split his forces, sending a significant portion to aid the Easterlings in their attack on Erebor and Dale. With a smaller army, Minas Tirith holds out better. The combined forces of Thorin's dwarves and elves, Theoden's Rohirrim, and the Grey Company arriving from the south utterly crush the besieging forces. Meanwhile, at the Lonely Mountain, King Dain holds out against the larger force of Easterlings and orcs sent against them. The armies of Erebor and Dale are significantly stronger and better equipped than in the original timeline, and they receive aid from Thranduil, who is not under attack thanks to the cleansing of the Greenwood. Dain successfully drives the enemy back. Frodo and Sam's journey remains unchanged. Aragorn leads his larger, more confident host to the Black Gates for the Battle of the Morannon. The ring is destroyed, Frodo and Sam are rescued, and the timeline converges with its original ending. Thus, the War of the Ring ends with the free people of the West in a much stronger and more secure position. Aragorn is crowned king and rebuilds both Gondor and Arnor. Thorin returns to Khazad-dûm, Legolas to Eregion, and the timelines of Middle-earth proceed as normal. So we see that the wisdom of a good choice and of a few leaders can lead to peace and joy. But what if their choices were not good? What if instead they decide to listen to the temptings of the Dark Lord? What would become of Middle-earth then?